Sometimes. Generally, we usually get to all of
Okay.
You want me to just wait over here
Yeah, that's fine.
and call the meeting to order?
Are you using this?
Told me if I was on that thing I didn't have to.
Okay.
But
Okay, that's fine. As long as you're talking loud enough for everybody can hear you. It's good with me.
we'll test that.
Rich still needs to do that.
Okay, I understand. Okay.
All right, welcome to tonight's work session. The purpose of tonight's work session is to engage the New Prairie United School Corporation community in a public conversation about the future of New Prairie United School Corporation school facilities. The focus of tonight's presentation will be placed on Olive and Prairie View schools due to possible future housing developments in Olive Township connected to the economic development in the area. During tonight's presentation, we'll be passing out note cards and pens for anyone who might have a question or comment. Following the presentation, we will take a brief recess to go through the note cards, and reconvene to answer any questions or comments you may have. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to Dr. White for tonight's presentation.
Okay, good evening. So first test, can you hear me in the back row? All right, so test number one is passed. I don't necessarily have to hold a microphone at the same time. That's good. So thank you for coming out this evening. I know it is hot in here, so I'm going to do the best I can to be as succinct as possible with these slides and this presentation. Mr. King mentioned we're going to try the following tonight, and we're hoping this might help with time. I think they already have a note card. You're going to get a note card. As I'm going through the information, if you have a question that you want to pose to the board or myself, jot the question or questions down, hold your hand up, and any number of employees or admin will come and get the cards. Mr. King's going to look at them, the board will kind of organize them, and then we'll go ahead and ask the question. We're hoping that might get you home a little faster this evening. Also, key point, going back up a little bit. So I'm not trying to hide behind this tripod at the same time. We're trying to broadcast this, so that's why I'm here. Don't feel like you have to feverishly write notes. This presentation is on the school system's website. Every bit of it, including some additional information that I'll explain as we go. So, just real straightforward this evening, couple of key points. One, truly and with all sincerity, no decisions have been made about any of this. The board is seriously interested in input. I'm going to throw out an idea or two tonight that I personally think might be something we should consider. It doesn't mean that's what we're going to do. Legitimately, there is time and interest in really taking in input. The second thing would be that the meeting itself really comes from community members in New Carlisle in particular that have stopped me in the community, at the gas station, what have you, and asked this basic question that some of you here tonight probably have, which is, we know Olive is our most populous elementary school, we know we have economic development, and we know there's likely in-district housing growth coming to Olive Township. Are you going to raise our taxes and add on to this school? It's a fair question. So we're going to try to begin to answer it tonight in a very straightforward way. Sort of, if you will, here's kind of the four pieces. Kind of take stock of where we are now, what the straightforward enrollment breakdown of this school system is, both in-district students and out-of-district transfer students. Very straightforward. We're going to put exactly as it is this fall. What those trends in enrollment have been in recent years, and then begin to look at the potential impact long-term if we do get housing development in Olive Township, and we're going to get some of it at some point. And what are some possible steps we could take? That's kind of the point and the goal tonight. And we'll see with kind of the climate control or lack thereof in the gym, we'll see how quickly I can get us through it, right? Mrs. Bush is in the back laughing. She's been a lot of meetings with me, and she knows I go on too long. That's what's going on back there. Okay. So, I think it's worth taking a moment or two to sort of step back and take stock of New Prairie Schools has always been a very successful school system, and a school system that families really seek. But the last 5 years has just been another level that we should all be proud of, and just a few highlights. This one is probably the most important and what we should be the most proud of. We are a student learning institution. And in the last 5 years, the school system's performance has gone to another place. If you go to the Indiana Department of Education website, data centers and reports, you can look for yourself and see the iLearn state results for all grade 3 through 8 students in every school system in the state. There are almost 300 public school systems in Indiana. And sometimes school systems like to say, well, our 3rd grade math performance was the highest in the county. Well, our 5th grade, this performance was the highest in the area. We like to look at this data point right here on the bottom. We think it's the most accountable data point because we're responsible for all of it. We're responsible for literacy development, we're responsible for math performance, and if you look at the 300 public school systems in the state, you would find that our school system is in the top 10%, in the top 25, and this has been the case a few years in a row. And we have been overperforming the state average by anywhere from 12 to 20%, going on multiple years in a row, almost a 5-year running data point, which means that it is not a fluke. And even more impressive than all of that, if you line up the top 25 school systems, most of them are in traditional communities that are known throughout the state as the most well-off communities in the state. We certainly do okay here, but from a student rate of students on free and reduced lunch, there are very few school systems on this list above 30% of students on free or reduced lunch assistance from the government. 40% of our students last year were in that status. Hardly anyone on this list has a poverty rate at that level. So that also tells us that our school system is overperforming similar school systems of the same poverty rate, which is excellent. I see a couple teachers in the audience. They deserve all kinds of credit, our administration, and you as a community, you are very supportive of our school system. So, what is the point of saying this? And I've gone into some pictures. Not only have we done well academically, but from a co-curricular and extracurricular standpoint, it has been record. Both fine arts and athletics, our show choir, our marching band, all in the state finals last school year. Our softball team recorded the first team state championship in school history 2 years ago. Our baseball team followed the next year. And if you're not aware, our wrestling program is becoming a state power. And we were in the top 10 all weekend at the state wrestling finals last year for the first time as a team. It was really incredible. We were the smallest school up on the board. It was fantastic. So there are so many great things happening in the school system. So how do we think about the future in managing the decisions we need to make in a way that supports this and keeps it going? Would be my point in trying to think about the things we're going to present. Okay. So let's take stock for a second and think about, all right, what's our current sort of school populations boundaries? Let's start with our traditional boundaries. In purple on the perimeter, you have our traditional boundaries. This is Rains Road to the west in LaPorte County, the Michigan border. This is Sabre Rush to the east in St. Joseph County. If you weren't aware, we're a two-county school system. I think we all know that by now, right? This whole school time count type thing. This is Division Road to the south, Crumbstown Road down here as you're going to John Boy. I'll go ahead and mention, we're going to get into tonight, on top of that, the three quadrants that you see are actually the elementary boundaries at present of our three elementary schools. If you live in the southwest corner, Rolling Prairie, heading towards the port, you attend Rolling Prairie Elementary. And in most instances we follow this. There's an occasional exception made for an in-district family, extenuating circumstances. For the most part, we stick with this. The upside down L here, the upside down L in the middle is Prairie View Elementary, going to the northwest corner in LaPorte County, and the middle sliver around New Prairie High School. And then to the east, the county line and everything over there is Olive Township, where we're at tonight. So keep those boundaries in mind as we discuss this evening. So let's start with our current enrollment and some enrollment trends, very straightforward. The school system, starting 25 years ago, New Prairie started accepting transfer students in 2008. So we've been accepting students out of those traditional boundaries almost 20 years. And we're going to show you those numbers in a minute. And as you can see, as we got into that world, like so many other school systems did, our enrollment increased. At its high point, just before my first year, the 2014-15 school year was its highest. If you remember Jim Durbany, longtime superintendent, great leadership of the school, his last year was our highest ever one-year enrollment. And then my first year, 2015-16, it kind of continued. And around COVID in 2020, it kind of hit a high point, and then it began to actually go the other way into the 2800s. Last fall in 2024 was our lowest one-year enrollment in nearly 20 years. We'll talk about why in a minute. This fall, we've actually seen a slight increase, and since we wrote this, that 2870 number, we're actually a little higher. We've added a few more students, and for the first time this year for secondary students, we've actually added an online school option, which we were hesitant to do. It wasn't really something we wanted to get into, but we realized part of the reason our enrollment was declining were the number of families withdrawing and placing their students in online schools. To such a degree, in our high school alone, over a 2.5-year period, 5 semesters, we lost 79 students to online schools. Some of them weren't even in this area of the state. So last spring, when we looked at that data, we realized that we probably really needed to provide that opportunity to families and see what happened. And we've seen a number of those families come back. So actually, as of today, our enrollment is actually closer to 2885, 2888 range. We've had a couple students leave, we've had a couple of late enrollments. So the enrollment is up a little, but is down from recent history. That's a key point. And if you look at each of our 5 schools, they follow a similar trend. The high school has about a 2% decrease over the last 5 years. The middle school, 7.5% decrease. That's the highest. Rolling Prairie, almost 6% decrease. Most of it in the last 5 years. Prairie View's been the most stable at around 300 students. That decrease in the last 5 years has been right at 2%. And then we have Olive, which is key to our conversation tonight, among the highest decrease at 6.5%. And very interesting to know that this fall in particular, we saw quite a drop in our enrollment. And we're actually saw today, I believe, Mrs. Bush, we're actually at 455, are we not? We must have added a family very recently. Because we were pretty consistent at 453 throughout this fall. But we're at 455 today. But as you can see, that's a good 30 students below where we were. Why? Part of it is our kindergarten enrollment in the last 2 years has gone down quite a bit. All 3 of our elementary schools, for the first time in years, have a kindergarten class size of 20 or less. All three elementary kindergartens, all sections this year. Olive has seen a decrease in kindergarten 2 years in a row. And it is a part of a regional northern Indiana trend and probably larger trend in the country. Families are just, the birth rate is down. People are waiting to get married. When they get married, they're waiting to have children. And that's a factor in our case to keep in mind that we're going to come back to. So as you think about concern about, here comes the economic development, here comes more housing, it is important to note that we do have a decrease in the short term, so we do have a little bit of space. That does give us flexibility, arguably, regarding the decision-making process and the timing. Maybe we don't need to do anything immediately, right? Okay. So there's back to the school system trend. Now I'm going to immediately transition to this. Just very straightforward. I mentioned the out-of-district transfer students earlier. This is a trend over 15 years. When we started to where we are now. And as you can see, it has been nothing but an increase over the last 15 years. To the point now that this fall, we have the highest percentage and total number of transfer students into our school system at 26.5%. When I arrived in 2015, this percentage was much closer to 12 to 13%. It's double. Just very straightforward. A couple of points about this. 2/3 are South Bend. A dive into that data point. The overwhelming number of those students, 80% plus, are from Warren Township, which you probably know from the area is that area between us and South Bend. Quince Road area, just as you get to the east of Sacred Rush that I showed at the beginning. We do have students coming from in the city of South Bend, no question, but not to the degree. The vast majority of them are coming from the Warren Township area, and particularly for this school as well. And we'll talk about some reasons why that is in a moment. We do lose students to other locations, online schools, parochial and private schools, and you see that number at the bottom. But as you can see, we take in many more transfer students than outgo. Okay. All right. Key point as we think about this situation and what we might do. Let's see a breakdown specifically to this building, and then I'm going to bring in Prairie View into the conversation, and there's a reason for that that will develop. So here we are here at Olive. 10 years ago, about almost 20% of the student population. And as we said before and established, we've actually decreased in enrollment in the district and at the school, but yet at the same time, our transfer students have nearly doubled. And it's just a simple reality that our in-district families, school age, have just been on a decline. And it has been the case for a while. And the transfer families have taken advantage of the available seats. And honestly, this is where I'm going to say the following. They've made significant contributions to the school system. One, the pictures I showed at the beginning, the student learning data. all those pictures of state finals and state championship teams, there are transfer students in every one of those photos. Also, there is a perception, a misperception, that disciplinary problems at NPUSC United Schools are largely the point of transfer students. I don't know why everybody's trying to call me now, right? I played this thing 4 times. Seriously, now. You had all day to call me. You're calling me. Anyway. Where was I at? Transfer students and discipline. The truth of the matter is, when you dive into our disciplinary data, 9 of 10 out of school suspensions in this school system are in-district students. We rarely have disciplinary problems with transfer students. 2 reasons why. 1, there is a district policy tied to state law that if an out-of-district student has 10 or more suspension days or 10 or more unexcused absences, they immediately have their transfer status revoked, and they are not eligible to attend the next school year. We're pretty consistent about enforcing that. And we can call families when we see it trending that direction, and usually families intervene quickly to help us get their student going in the right direction because they want to be here. And they don't want to be in whatever the homeschool is for whatever reason. Reason number 2 gets at kind of the whole matter of, I've lost my train of thought. What was the second? There's a second key reason. I'm going to come back to that for some reason. For those of you that have heard this more than once, what am I forgetting to say here? The second reason. You've not been paying that much attention, have you, right? Okay. There's the transfer. We do not provide bus transportation for the out-of-district students. Families have to transport themselves. So, and in often cases, that's 15, 20, 25, 30 minutes, okay? I see someone shaking their head. Are there a few exceptions, people that come to an in-district home, someone they know? Probably. But by and large, these folks that are transfer students have to transport themselves. So that is another layer of commitment that a family has to make. So, okay, this is Olive's breakdown. Here's Prairie View's breakdown. Around 300 students, and you can see their transfer students have nearly tripled, but are not near the number of Olive. All right. Why? Biggest reason, all 3 of our elementary schools are high performing. The biggest issue is the start time at Prairie View. It's later. It's advantageous for a family that lives in the central time zone. Not as much as you live in the eastern time zone. So we're going to put that out there. So that brings us to probably you're thinking to yourself, okay, what does this mean in terms of finances? Our transfer students, are they contributing? Yes and no. It depends on what we focus on. The state of Indiana, there are 2 main financial funds that financially support a school system. The education fund, that funds educational programming, salaries and benefits of the employees, teachers, administrators that work directly with students, supplies, programming costs, coaches, extracurricular pay, all of that. That is funded by the state of Indiana, and it's tied to the number of students in your school system. So in that manner, the transfer students have a significant financial impact on the school system. You could see the number there last year. Wow, almost $5 million. Out of the budget, nearly $24 million. And it has enabled us. Part of our success is that the school board and the school districts have been able to invest in programming. Our high school has programming on par with a larger school like Penn Harris Madison because we have additional funds to spend on a program like engineering or robotics or HOSA or pre-nursing, or I could go on. Maybe we don't have as many engineering teachers as a larger school, but we have a program. We have licensed and trained teachers. And this helps with that. So with this, as we consider how to move going forward, I'm just submitting an argument that the transfer students need to be a factor in our thinking and in our conversations and potentially what we do. They've been with us for a long time and they've made significant contributions. And the majority of them are coming from a township that is not that far away. Now, what about property taxes? There's also the operations fund, and if you've ever looked at a detailed way at your tax bill, you know you pay a couple of different taxes, and a tax rate is paid to the school system. One, well, there's kind of two that is in a debt category. There's the debt service fund, which is pretty low. There's a couple small bonds that are involved in that, and then the referendum that was voted on in 2016 that is funding the renovations that happened in the facility, and that is, of course, a larger debt. If you're interested, and we were asked at the first meeting, we have published a 2-page document that lays out the current debt situation of the school system in great detail. It's at the district website with this presentation and some other supporting documents, if you're interested in going into detail about it. Back to the operations fund on our property taxes. Our local property taxes, you'll also see in your tax bill something called operations, and it is a larger number. It is about 60 cents for $100 of assessed value. And that supports the operations fund of the school district, which is building maintenance, building repairs, the facilities and staff connected to that, transportation, the employees related to transportation. Bus replacement is another part of that. That is some of our local property tax dollars for the families that live in the traditional boundaries. The out-of-district families that do not live here do not pay towards that. That goes to their local home school system that they're not attending. So it is valid to say they support financially in one way and in another way they don't. That is just the present, just true facts of the situation. Okay. So then that turns to, okay, what about the current facilities? What is the situation there? We're looking at Iowa right now, and we're looking at kind of a classroom map. And our current grade out of 453 students. 3 sections for the most part. We do have about 80 students right now in grade 1, so we do have a 4th section there at the moment. Even though our numbers are down a little here, there are a few class grades that things are tight from a class size standpoint. Grade 5 is near 30 per classroom, and grade 3, we were going to have 4 sections. We had a late resignation just before school started. It's really difficult to find teachers after school started, so we went ahead and proceeded with 3 sections, which drove up the class size. But we pushed another assistant into that grade. Are we still working on that? Did we? On the additional assistant for grade 3, yeah, we were able to do that. So we did push more assistant staff there. If you look at the building as a whole, what we're submitting right now is the classroom utilization rate is at about 90%. Of 28 classrooms, we're using the vast majority of them. There were a couple unused. The one teacher that we had a late resignation, that room is actually up here. This is a classroom that's used as a STEM lab. It's a part-time room, it's available. And then we do have a couple of, we have a classroom for our counselor who works with our students part-time and provides some classes along with art and music as a part of the week. And we've got some intervention staff that works with struggling learners that we could combine rooms. So a couple of classrooms are available. We got the question in the first meeting. Okay, fine, we're at 453. What's the maximum capacity of the school? We think about 550 is probably, and it would be tight. Might have to consider some portables in back near the parking lot, etc. So there is some room here, but it's tight. If you've been here during the school day and you know how we do school, we do a lot of reteaching for kids that didn't learn key concepts, and we do it right away. Like, we don't wait 2 months. We do it the next day, within the week. And there are a lot of kids in the pod areas, working in small groups or with individuals, and we run out of like ideas on space for that. So, but there's a little bit of room. Now, I bring Prairie View into the conversation for a couple of reasons. One, you're likely aware, Prairie View and Olive were built in the mid-90s. The buildings are about 30 years old, even though they look much newer than that, and they're carbon copies of each other from a blueprint building standpoint. Prairie View is smaller, just around here. the classroom utilization rate is not nearly as high. Up to 10 classrooms available there. Same basic max capacity. And I think that it's very reasonable to bring that into in the community conversation about what we do going forward. Okay. We got asked about Rolling Prairie last meeting, so we added this from the first meeting. Just slightly smaller, but not by much. Just a few less classrooms, so max capacity there would be 500 to 525. They're at 423 at the moment. About a 90% classroom utilization rate as well. Okay, I already talked about this. So then that turns to kind of what's going on in the community right now and what might we be dealing with in the next 5 to 10 years that might put pressure on our situation. You know, if you live in Olive Township or New Carlisle, you know, from traffic patterns to you know about all this. I don't need to go through every single bullet point. But you know we're getting a battery plant. It gets bigger, it gets further and further along every day. You know we have data centers that are coming to the community. In addition, you know, that impacts both our local situation. Many of those tax revenues that come in will start going into a TIF situation that will be set aside for projects to help increase the infrastructure improvements out at the economic development out there. Long term, it will have an impact and help us. But in the short term, those TIF pieces will be a part of this. There was a grant applied for to support some housing development. Let's talk about, so there is concern and some confirmed housing development that we may see some growth here in Olive Township or even New Carlisle in the next 5 to 10 years. Some projections have been 5 to 10% increases. Others will tell you that they don't think we're going to get any increase in population at all. The local population has been in some decline anyway. We saw the impact on in-district students. And some have argued that there won't be an increase in population at all. It's hard to know what the future will bring, and as a school system, we've heard about that. So, what are the confirmed housing developments at this moment? It's been a moving target. At the first meeting, we put up these two. So this is just north of 20. This is called the Hedgecroft development. This is where some grant money was sought after by our counties and Joseph Economic Development to help develop this area. As we understand it, about 530 housing units will eventually go into that location. We understand it's a mix of townhomes, apartments, perhaps houses of 1 to 3 bedrooms. The South Bend Chamber of Commerce has stated that they believe most of that development will not bring school-age children to this school district. That is their view, because the type of housing units and or price point will either lead young professionals to move there or retirees. And that could be true. I tend to think about it this way. Let's say over 500 housing units, even 20% of them bring school-age children. That would be approximately 100 plus students. And typically with things like this, you tend to see more of those types of kids in a new housing development be elementary age in nature. Maybe that's not the case with this type of development. So maybe we end up with 100 plus students because of this, and 2/3 of them are elementary. 50, 60, and let's say, as it sits right now with our current boundaries in district, all those students would be slated to go to Olive Elementary. Who knows what happens in our student population between then? It could go back to declining. Maybe the online school option has stabilized it only for the short term. We don't know. But that is confirmed, and that is definitely something that has to be a part of the conversation. Even since the first meeting, this is about 15 houses south of where we are, that we've since were told last week that that development has been canceled and was a part of a redevelopment commission meeting very recently. So perhaps that's not going to happen, and normally we only have this as a confirmation. I would also add, living here in this community for 10 years now, you know, if you live here, all the outskirts of the town have a bunch of land that is basically potentially waiting on housing development. That eventually, sooner or later, that's going to arrive. I don't know, it might be another 20 years, or it could happen in the next 5. And that could bring more pressure to the situation. Could, right? So that's what we know at the moment. It has been pointed out to us, you should be careful to project a bunch of growth in you know, some models would say that people will commute into the economic development, they're not necessarily going to move here. The cost of housing here is rising, et cetera. But we do have a confirmed development of over 500 housing units. That's nothing to ignore, particularly with a school where we sit that has historically been 90 to 95% classroom utilization in the last 10 years. And so I think it's fair to bring it up. Okay, I mentioned the start times of the schools. Here they are at present. And we kind of have what I'll call a two-tier approach. We have 3 schools that start earlier. Those are all essential, but they're advantageous to anyone living in the Eastern time zone because in reality, the middle school starts at 8:05 Eastern, 8:20 Eastern here at Olive. So if you live in the Eastern time zone and students come here, it's kind of like, okay, that's 8 a.m., 7 a.m., call it what you want. But then you have the 2 elementary schools in LaPorte County that start much later. That's 9:40 Eastern. So what we typically find are students maybe coming from Warren Township. The families are interested in any school they can be a part of. But the 9:40 Eastern time for Prairie View is a concern for the family that doesn't fit into their family life and work schedule. So they end up saying, we really want to, because of the time piece, is there any way we can make that happen? So we'll try to get them to tour Prairie View, and often when they do, they go ahead and accept, but not always, and then they'll try to come back here, and we just say, well, we don't know. We need to see what in-district enrollment looks like first, and we'll follow up with you later in the summer. Sometimes we can accommodate them, sometimes we cannot. I'm submitting that I think that this piece is an important factor in the puzzle as we move forward. Could there be some flexibility in the future of this that might help us? Could be. Okay. So let's kind of get to the end of this. So you've already seen me paint the picture. We could get in a situation where we could get overcrowded here. And it could get uncomfortable in terms of programming and staff, et cetera. So what are the options? I'm just going to throw out a couple. These are not in order. And I'm just going to tell you right now, this one right here, I don't like it. And I'm personally telling you that I think options exist that we can avoid this one, at least for quite a while. And this option is the one a lot of you have been worried about that prompted these meetings have been happening. Are you going to add on to Olive? And are you going to raise our property tax? Well, there are a variety of issues with adding on to this. I know this isn't the best. I'll do what I can do. But you probably already know, here we are, the school is landlocked. We have that problem. Expanding to the east and the west is a major problem, probably not really much of a scenario. So our options are north and south. The problem in the north is this is our parking lot, this is our facility, and this is a major problem from multiple standpoints. Moving a parking lot would be a very expensive venture. 1. 2, we would be disrupting a cornerstone youth program in this community that I don't think they have a current sort of another option at this moment. And remember the pictures at the beginning. Our high school baseball team is one of the most successful extracurricular activities in this community. Why in the world would we do something to disrupt one of their main feeder programs? So those are all problems if we go to the south, which probably makes the most sense, but there are other problems, which is this way. And right through this curtain is the cafeteria and the kitchen and then the playground. And then we have the only area to accept deliveries back here for our school lunch program. If we add on to the south, we have the additional problem of potentially having to move some key infrastructure like a kitchen and a cafeteria at additional taxpayer expense. Now, DLC Construction, which has helped us with a number of things over the years, a couple of their representatives are here tonight, they've been just trying to advise us on what some of these scenarios could look like. They put together some projections that added on even 4 to 6 classrooms, dealing with some of the changes that would be needed to support the infrastructure. In addition, we'd have to look at moving deliveries. Here's the playground. This is a retention area that we use for stormwater management that would require some unique solutions. The potential exists anywhere from $4 to $6 million just to add an addition with a half dozen classrooms and a bunch of other problems that would go with it to kind of make it work. They've recently kind of thought, could we get creative and almost like a horseshoe? Add on a little here, add on a little here, less disruption here. That's possible. But again, it's still going to be quite an expense. And it will be difficult to impossible to add on to this school in a way that does not raise our property taxes. That's just a straightforward truth. So, could that get to that point someday? It could. But I think, and again, I'm speaking for myself as a part of just getting the community conversation, I think there's some other options that this can be delayed or prevented, what I just described. Here is one of them. It is the following. I mentioned the elementary grounds. Here's our elementary students, Prairie View, and then this is all. Here's the housing development that's coming. We could look at attempting to better utilize Prairie View, which has multiple unused classrooms, up to 10 at this point in time, in a couple of different ways. One, we could look at the start time of the school. We could move it forward, closer to Olive's time, and it would be more advantageous to families to the east that are going here now. We could look at that. Quick note, if we do that, because of our transportation needs, one of the secondary buildings would have to be traded with Prairie View's current start time. We would need to run what we call a two-tier transportation system. We have only so many drivers, and we would need so many in kind of tier 1 at that earlier time, 7 to 7:30 Central, and then so many for tier 2 at that 8:30 to 8:40 Central. So the middle of high school, one of them would have to move back if Prairie View were to move forward. So keep that in mind. Another thing we could look at are the boundaries for in-district families. We could look at Prairie View's boundaries and take the L and make it a T. And take this area and route to Prairie View. We could do that. We could add to that we do not have a ton of school-age children in this northeastern quadrant of Olive Township to go to Olive right now. We could tell all families that their kids do not have to be disrupted and they can finish it off. And a future date could be set that anyone who moves to this area as a certain date, January 1st of 2029, 28, 2030, any of them, they would go to Prairie View. It's just under 3 miles from here. Particularly if you go to Hudson Lake, you could potentially do an early deal with one set of train tracks. And actually, without the train, you can get there from here in less than 10 minutes. It's really not that bad. Now, a lot of pros to this possibility. I would know is, in this scenario, we're saying to an Olive Township family, albeit new, that the school system, the school that's named after their township, they couldn't attend, and they got to go somewhere else. I realize that's odd, and that would be something to wrestle with. And that's part of what we want to do over this fall. Maybe that's going too far. Maybe that's not a good idea. I will admit, I personally think that has some merit that we should work on. But maybe not. Maybe that's not it. There are some other options out there. We threw these out early in the last meeting. I went ahead and had the slide. Some of these I don't like at all. And I could bore you with educational statistics for a half hour of what the problem is. Now, the top one is a legitimate option. We can wait to see how things play out and consider the options, take in the survey data, and we can do nothing at this time. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, it probably isn't. The other two are are, in my argument, and I can back it up with some educational data, are fraught with issues. You've gotten a little bit of input. What about grade level centers? And that means like Olive is the K1, and then Prairie View becomes grades 2, 3, and Rolling Prairie. That is really hard on a family. That strips away from the community support we have. Part of the reason our schools are so successful is because they have the full support of New Carlisle for this, the full support of Rolling Prairie, the full support of the Prairie View community for that school. That is a factor. There's no doubt about it. And I've seen schools that go this route tear away from that, and their performance drops. Moving the 5th grade to the middle school. The middle school is actually designed in a way that it's actually easier to add on to that school. There's land around it, and there were some things done in the infrastructure to make adding on a little more feasible. Okay, but there are major concerns with what happens to upper elementary students when you move them into a middle school experience. Parents are often concerned. There's usually great lengths taken by school systems, school boards, administrations to separate those kids, 5th grade to the rest of middle school as much as possible. And then you have further underutilized elementary buildings that have been paid for by taxpayers. And school systems that have done this have seen that issue with their elementary schools time and again. So major problem, we've heard that a few times, so thought we'd throw it on. The bottom two in particular, I make it clear, I do not endorse those two, and I think they're both bad ideas. Again, but I'm speaking for myself. Okay. Now, what are the next steps? We're having these meetings. I've gotten through the gist of the, I've gone a little shorter than the last time. One more meeting in late October in Prairie View. All this information is at the district website homepage. Scroll down to the bottom. It's labeled plain as day, fall 2025 community meetings. Our debt summary of the school district, we were asked at the last meeting what is our cost per student. It is about $200 under the number I showed you that what we get per student. So that's a pretty decent ratio, and we have a calculation and explanation on the website. And we also have this QR code. Here's a key piece, and this is one of the questions on the survey. There are 10 questions. This is one of them. After reviewing the presentation, which option is the best approach in your view? And on this question, we're asking you to pick one and only one. There are other questions where you can pick more than one and rate them. But on this one, we want you to take a stand. And we're very interested to gather community temperature and viability of supporting certain options. And it can very well, I've thrown out in all the meetings, Prairie View utilization, particularly the in-district boundary lines, are something I think we should take a serious look at. We may have 98% of you say, that's horrible, don't do that. That is key information for our school board over the next year or two as they determine what policy will be and what we actually do. They're very interested in this data, and I mean it sincerely when I tell you no decisions have been made about this. Okay, now, we're going to take a short break. You're going to look at the cards, right? Do any of you have questions you've asked? So go ahead and they're going to collect, and then you can put up your phone and use the QR code, and you can immediately go to the survey and fill it out for yourself. And I appreciate you sitting through this hot gym. I think we were thinking it'd be cooler when we, just being fall and later, but we had a heat wave kind of thing. So we'll look at those, and then Mr. King will address them, and then we'll try to do the best job of answering them, and we'll get you back into the air conditioning in the hallway. And we'll be around afterwards to ask individual questions of any of us, myself.
You just go read them in the Bible. reasons, or do you want people to walk up and ask their question? Does it matter?
I'm gonna have them to handle this, because I can't read it. See, got it. See now. Question, let's take it to question number one. Our schools are performing well with current class sizes. What are projected impacts of success on larger class sizes?
Okay, so often, and what I'm going to say, many disagree with, okay? But I'm going to cite some educational research that you can look up for yourself. So the truth of the matter is, I mentioned a couple at the beginning. We already have some targeted sections in certain grades that have 29, 30, or 31 students. Grade 5 right now, at all 3 schools are at 29 or 30. Third grade here is at 29. And particularly at all over the last 10 years, we have had times where grades 4 and 5 in particular have been 31, 32, even 33 in one worst case scenario when we had some late move-ins to the school system we didn't know were coming. And the truth of the matter is that the performance for those classes were quite strong. Because the research says the following: class size matters in kindergarten and first grade. And once you get beyond those 2 grades, educational researchers have not been able to prove class size matters. They can prove it in K1 when you get beyond that. So as a school system, we've tried to manage class size at K1 and not let it get beyond 24 to 1. And then in second grade, we let it go beyond that. We've tried to keep it to 24 to 26 as we get into grades 2 and 3. And then let it get bigger as we get into grades 4 and 5. There have been some exceptions at times. So my point to the question is, our middle school tends to have large class sizes, 25 to 32, the way we run the school. They've performed well, particularly compared to other middle schools. So we've done well despite some pockets of high class sizes. Research would tell us that can continue. Now, you also have to be practical. I mean, if you get to the point that every last classroom in a school system is overstuffed to the gills, you do run into a fatigue with your staff, a strain on your educational resources. But right now, we've been able to manage it okay. That's what I would say to that.
What other options were considered that was not presented or discussed?
I mean, probably this slide, because I didn't have this up last time. I didn't even really want to bring up the middle 2. I could be forgetting one. What am I forgetting? What am I forgetting, kids? The olive start time? Which direction? Oh, okay. I did forget. I do think somebody brought that up at the first meeting. So I suppose that could be studied from an impact. There is some data that starting later helps students in terms of rest. That data point, I'll admit, is one that I tend to have some different thoughts on. But sure, absolutely, that is one that we have not. I mean, any number of avenues could be looked at with the start time, not just the ones I presented. And I don't need to admit that because I forgot about that one. So that's another thing.
And then how would changing the start time of two schools affect extracurricular activities and transportation associated with them?
Yeah, so the truth is that the one I suggested, if Prairie View start time moves up closer to the current one at Olive, one of the secondary schools would have to slot into their time for transportation. It would likely be the middle school. It would be significantly harder from an extracurricular activity perspective to move back to high school because we compete to the east so often. Our middle school tends to do a little more to the west, or it's at least in a little more balance. We have issues right now with supervising students at the middle school with the start day ending when it does, just after 2:10 Eastern Central Time, and then extracurricular programming sometimes not starting until 3:30 or later. It's hard on families that have to kind of run up, get their kid, get them something to eat, come back. If we backed up the middle school start time, it would help with that. So that's a factor. And then it's also appropriate, and it needs to be said, the impact on transportation, if we were to trade Prairie View and the middle school, needs more study. It would put more route needs at that later time than we have now, likely, and that needs study. In conversation with our current drivers, maybe some of our drivers won't be able to make that work. They have lives that have been set around, you know, we have more routes in that earlier slot, and if we move more to the later, it could be an issue. That needs more study. So that's how I would answer this.
You had mentioned in-district transfer review and exceptions. How many in-district transfers have?
How many in-district transfers to Olive? Oh, okay, very few. I don't remember the exact number. I want to. It's usually under 10. Our principal is saying 6. Okay, it's a little more than I thought. Usually it's tied to one of a couple of things. There's a family history where they started here, then they moved somewhere else in the school system, and we typically let those families keep continuity. That's one reason. Every once in a while, we have some extenuating circumstances that honestly usually deny the initial request. Like let's say they live elsewhere in the school system, but they, if they own a business here, that's one we've automatically said yes to. So we have a few of those. Sometimes if they have an after-school thing tied to somewhere in New Carlisle, we've actually said no initially, then we see how the class sizes play out. And if we can accommodate it at the last minute, we do. But that would be, I mean, you're talking, we're talking less than 1% of the school. Grade school. Oh, and of course, yes, of course. How could I forget that? Yeah, thank you. So.
How many in-districts have left for homeschool?
Okay. Of that 181 that was showing there, it's about 40% of that number. Actually, when you consider the ones that initially withdrew for homeschool status, and then they enrolled in an online school, the number is much higher. It's over 50% of that 180, 81 that have left us. The online school option that we offered this year for the first time, we've gotten a number of those families back. So it's over 50% when you take in homeschool status, then they enroll in an online school instead of supplying their own instruction. So that'd be the answer to that.
And how many out-of-district children use Prairie View preschool programs?
Okay, that one I don't know because we don't technically run that program. The YMCA runs that program. We could certainly get that data. I don't know that it's any, but right. Yeah, good point. And that's a good question in terms of, Some school systems are adding preschool throughout their district. Do we end up doing that? And how does that impact? But we don't have any explicit plans at this time for that. Nor do we have substantial requests for it. It doesn't mean we won't, and maybe that's something that'll come out of the survey information. Because there are open-ended questions that you can write in ideas and write in suggestions. So.
Why not eliminate transfer students in student population?
That's certainly an option. And that's a legitimate possibility of where this may want to go. If the decision is that we don't want the school system to get much bigger, if the in-district population comes back up because of the Hedgecroft addition, that is certainly a part of the solution to this. And we can even do nothing to any of the schools or the start times and just tell families that are currently coming here on transfer status, your only option is Prairie View. If you want to go there, you've got to look at that later start time.
What's the current space at the high school?
Okay. Right now, 980 students. We could get to about 1,200 with our current blueprint. For that number, there are two interior areas that we use as common areas right now near our auditorium that when we renovated, we had originally planned to put classrooms in the two common spaces. We decided to not do that in the middle of the project because we identified issues that we wanted to spend money elsewhere. So we routed that money that was already in the budget elsewhere. So we left that to potentially do at a later time if we would need to. At the time, John, if you remember, as I recall, those two classrooms were going to be like mid 300,000 range. And that was in 2016, 17. So of course there'd be an increase from there. We would have to do that, but we could get to 1,200. With the middle school, we're in high 600s right now. We could get to 800 in the middle school. Maybe some help with modifications, portable classrooms in an instance or two, but we could get to 800. So district-wide, 3,500 is a number we could get to with our current blueprint. But that also means some balancing of elementary enrollment and more utilization at Prairie View if we were to get to that total number with our current blueprints. So.
Why aren't we utilizing elementary efficiencies between each other?
Say that again.
Elementary efficiencies?
Well, by policy, we haven't, that is something that could be considered, but we would need to change policy. There is what we do within, are you suggesting the out-of-district students or the like? Because many of these students and families, they don't want to go, they want to go here. They don't want to go to Prairie View, either because of the start time or they want to be here or a combination of the two. And so in many instances, what we see is if they don't end up at all, they don't end up at New Prairie at all. And you can see for a number of years, we haven't, we'll eventually offer them Prairie View, but they often decline it. And then we've stopped at that. That's certainly something the board could consider. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but that is certainly something that can be considered.
Can we require Warren Township or school?
That is a very interesting question, and I think is something that will be evaluated, particularly when you consider how many of those transfer students actually come from Warren Township. You may be aware, Green Township, which was southeast, became part of John Glenn's school system through a new state law. That is something that could be looked at. And is that part of what the board evaluates in terms of, is there interest on Warren Township leadership part? Is there Maybe that's something that's explored in all this. Okay, good questions, thank you. Please engage in that community survey as we continue to take the input. We'll hang around afterwards if you have additional questions or comments. Thank you for your time and hanging in there. And we look forward to your continued input and going through this process this fall. Thank you.